Dell here again. This is where we swing a while right through the next hour with big band sounds. And to that end, this. Just have to take that out of wraps every now and again and give myself a boot. The Big 18 and their big band version of Artie Shaw's Gramercy Five's Summit Ridge Drive with the original harpsichordist Johnny Guarneri present. I did say that we'd be looking at a few of the newer albums that came up last week. Let's do that. First, a mono collection from MCA called 16 Big Band Greats, Volume 2. In fact, from it, We've listened to Dorsey and Shaw of 1950. That was last week. Let's move back now to a couple of earlier classics, both from 1939. In date order, Count Basie from February of the year and Jive at 5. Count Basie, Jive at 5, when the band was teeming with talent. Sweets Edison, Buck Clayton, Dickie Wells, Benny Morton, Lester Young, Chew Berry, and of course that immaculate rhythm section with Basie on piano, Freddie Green guitar, Walter Page on bass, and Joe Jones drums. That same year of 1939, on the eve of the war, the Bob Crosby Band cut one of my forever favorites, Boogie Woogie Macheech. Cheech, and the Bob Crosby Band was bristling with names at that time too. Just let me read the complete personnel as printed on the sleeve, I gratefully tell you. Yes. In the trumpets, Billy Butterfield, Zeke Zarchi, Shorty Sherrock, that's not bad. The trombones, Warren Smith and Ray Conniff. The special clarinetist was Irving Fazzola. The altoists were Joe Kearns, and Bill Stegmaier, who was also a great clarinet player. Tenors, Eddie Miller and Gil Roden. The pianist was Joe Sullivan, Nappy Lamar on guitar, Bob Hackett, of course, string bass, and Ray Baduke, drums. Recorded in New York on the 29th of August, 1939, Boogie Woogie by Cheech. And that, in fact, is the opening track of this 16 Big Band Greats album, Volume 2 from MCA. And they're on the number, or all of them, on CDLM 8046. I can't check out all 16 tracks, but let me name a few at random. Maybe there's one among them that you've been waiting for years. Going back, I see there's an Isham Jones recording from 1934 of China Boy. There's Dorsey Dervish, Jimmy Dorsey and his orchestra, that's 36. My Blue Heaven, the famous Jimmy Lunsford recording, which Sir Oliver arranged. Peg of My Heart, Glenn Miller's orchestra of 1937. That was virtually, it was the first band he put together, I suppose, with Charlie Spivak and Manny Klein on the trumpets and Sterling Bowes and George Simon on drums. Studio band, really. Things Ain't What They Used to Be from Charlie Barnett, and on side 2, St. James Infirmary from Jack Teagarden, Walking and Swinging from Les Brown and his orchestra, 1940 date on that one, and the two that we had last week, The Continental from Artie Shaw and Opus 2 from Tommy Dorsey. Here you are, that's you are, 16 Big Band Greats on MCA. Now, Mr. Harry James. Hagen's Harlem Nocturne, Harry James and his orchestra of March 1964. And that, as much a feature for the clarinetist as anyone. Bob Achilles is his name. Perhaps the Americans have a different way of pronouncing it, because obviously he ain't no heel, you see. Sorry about that. Bit of flutter I noticed on that. Whether it was the turntable or the disc, I'm not too sure. Anyway, we'll check it out. That's one of the 17 tracks on the third big band sound of Harry James and his orchestra, which is on Verve 2317110. Verve 2317110, the third big band sound of Harry James and his orchestra. Certainly more from that album in the future. Both Humph and I last week played things from another new Verve album, the second volume under the title The Kings of Swing. It's a double set of recordings from the Woody Herman Band and various offshoots led by Flip Phillips, Stan Getz, Sims, Louis Belson, Bill Harris, and Vibesman Terry Gibbs. The Gibbs tracks are the only ones in stereo because they date from 1960, while the others are from 1946 through the 50s. So if I may, another Gibbs item this time, and we'll have a sort out on the other things for a later date. Terry Gibbs, the big band, and Dancing in the Dark. Terry Gibbs and his big band, Dancing in the Dark, from The Kings of Swing, Volume 2, on Verve 2683067. Double album, of course, Verve 2683067, and more from that one in the future, too. Talking to Carol Carr after last Saturday's concert, and while I'm about it, may I compliment the whole Sid Lawrence aggregation for an absolutely faultless presentation. And incidentally, there's something the radio audience didn't know. Just about 2 minutes before we were to start the second half, Sid and I learned that Andy Smith, who was one of the trombone players, and who was also one of the voices in the Serenaders, had twisted his ankle very badly indeed and was in considerable pain. Obviously, with the first aid, he was not going to be ready in time to get on the stage. And all this was happening on the opposite side from where Sid and I were. But as we were trying to make contingency plans about changing the vocal group numbers and what were we going to do without a trombonist. On stage, we had to go for the second half. And there, occupying Andy Smith's chair, was Don Lusher. He'd volunteered to play the part, and he did. He played the very first number, absolutely at sight, and it was in a frantic arrangement of Strike Up the Band. And then Andy Smith got on stage, and Don dived off, and I don't think we ever thanked him, really, for all that. Absolutely marvellous. That's a professional for you, you see. As I was saying, talking to Carol Carr after the show, we complimented Singers Unlimited and said what a marvellous group they are. And I'm going to play one more track from the new album, which hasn't, I don't think, been issued here, and which I have from Germany. Sentimental Journey, it's called, Singers Unlimited with Robert Farnon and his orchestra. And this is the longest track on the LP, Angel Eyes.
Think that love's not around, still it's uncomfortably near. My old heart ain't gaining no ground, because my angel eyes ain't here. Angel eyes, that old devil said, they glow unbearably bright. Need I say that my love's misspent with angel eyes tonight? So drink up, all you people, order anything you see, have fun, you happy people. The drink and the laughs on me. Pardon me, but I gotta run. The facts uncommonly clear. Gotta find who's now number one, and why my angel eyes ain't here.
fantastic Singers Unlimited with the Robert Farnon Orchestra, recorded here in London in 1974. Still, I don't think released here, but will be, I'm sure, within a very short time. Sentimental Journey is the name of the album. There are 8 tracks on it, and Angel Eyes, which you just heard, is one of them. Singers Unlimited, Bonnie Herman, Don Shelton, Len Dressler, Gene Perling, and Robert Farnon and the orchestra. Now, to say that if he'd never recorded anything else, Bobby Hackett would be immortal for that bridge passage in String of Pearls is probably a bit of a wild statement. But nevertheless, it's not all that far from the truth, I don't think. So famous is that ad-lib solo that no one dare play String of Pearls without quoting it. In other words, it's now part of the arrangement. But of course, Bobby Hackett has much more to be remembered for. And let's begin. In 1938, he'd first led a band in 1936, but in 1938 he came down from Providence, Rhode Island, his home, and was working in New York. And this is one of the records he made around that time. Strain, recorded by the Bobby Hackett Band in February 1938, with George Brunes on trombone, Pee Wee Russell clarinet, Benny Billings on tenor sax, Dave Bowman on piano, Eddie Condon on guitar, Clyde Newcomb bass, and Johnny Blowers on drums. 1938, of course, was the era of the big bands, and I'm looking at an album which I don't think was released over here. Certainly it's an American copy that I have. And the note is by Mort Good, who says that really these were the days of the big bands and the romantic days when dancers crowded bandstands and listened to the music. Bobby's reputation as a soloist had grown by this time, 1938, and an MCA agent promised huge success if he put his own orchestra together. The April the 13th, 1939 date included such memorable musicians as Pee Wee Russell again, Ernie Caceres, Dave Bowman, Eddie Condon, Sid Jacobs, Don Carter, Brad Gowans on valve trombone, and he'd followed Bobby down from Boston and in fact wrote this marvellous arrangement for the big Bobby Hackett band of Ain't Misbehavin'. If I may return to Mort Good's sleeve note here in this album, because it's pointed. He says, the big band of Bobby Hackett made it big. Artistically, there were great performances by Bobby on arrangements that either he or Brad Gowans or Buck Ram wrote. Then they went out to play various spots, the World's Fair in New York. They were at band pavilions in the East, and at hotels such as the Ben Franklin in Philadelphia. It was during the Philadelphia date that the band almost made it big financially, but for various reasons, and some were the musicians in the orchestra, it didn't. Bobby gave up the band. It was very short-lived. They cut 4 titles on that date in April 1939, and one of them is significant. It was Sunrise Serenade, which had, in effect, a part in his life, because Sunrise Serenade, Frankie Carl had written, and very soon Bobby Hackett was to join the band in which Frankie Carl was the pianist. And of course Sunrise Serenade was a big hit for the Miller Band, and that was really the next step. But let's go to Miller via Horace Heidt and his orchestra, which Bobby joined in 1940 and was there for about a year. And during that time he made some arrangements and cut this arrangement of Clarinet Marmalade. Marmalade, Bobby Hackett, as one of Horace Height's musical nights. As I said, Bobby spent about a year with the band, and let's not forget that in addition to blowing one of the greatest cornets in the world, Bobby was also a guitarist of quality. And how he came to join Glenn Miller on July the 10th, 1941, he himself recalls in a little meeting that happened some years later, a sort of reunion of Miller alumni, and in fact it is Johnny Desmond, singer with the Army Air Force Orchestra, who puts this question to Bobby Hackett.
Bobby, in the Glenn Miller Band in civilian days, you were one of the great horn men of all time, but you were playing the guitar some of the time with that band all the time. How did that come about?
Well, I'll try to shorten the story, but I was hanging out up in New England, where I come from, and I had to have some dental work done, which is a serious interruption for a trumpet player, you know. And I had a very dear friend thereabouts by the name of Cy Shribman, one of the greatest men that ever had anything to do with the music business. I think he was Glenn's personal advisor, right? So after about 3 weeks had gone by, I'm trying to practice a little every day and start vibrating again with the new chops. I get a call from Cy Shribman, and he said, how would you like to join the Glenn Miller Band? Now, by this time, they were so hot that you couldn't walk down the street without... The name would come up, have you heard the wonderful Glenn Miller Band, and so forth. So I said, well, who wouldn't, Cy? You know, tell me what. So he said, well, you have to meet him in St. Louis next week, next Thursday. They're doing the Chesterfield program, and just walk in, and Glenn wants to have you in the band. I said, well, how nice, you know. Let me start easy. I'll play the fourth part, and so forth. So I said, gee, thanks, Cy, you know, send me the tickets, this and that. So as a parting word, he said, oh, by the way, Bobby, I said, what? He said, Glenn wants you to bring the banjo. I said, Cy, nobody plays banjos now. Could he mean the guitar? He said, well, whatever it is, bring it. So I went there and made my entrance. Bill Conway was playing the guitar in the band, one of the Martinaires. As a matter of fact, he did all the writing. He was a wonderful, wonderful talent. So I get somebody's leftover jacket and sit next to Bill Conway with the banjo, and right away we start kidding, laughs, you know, swap guitars and everything. And from then on, it seemed to go pretty smoothly.
Someday we'll be close together, wait and see. Oh, by the way, this time the dream's on me. You'll take my hand and you look at me adoringly.
Hackett reminiscing about joining the Miller Band and playing that lovely cornet obligato behind the Miller Reeds in the first chorus of This Time the Dream's on Me, which Ray Everly sang. At that reunion night, Bobby told some lovely anecdotes. May I just recall one? It refers to the very last Miller broadcast from the theatre in Passaic, New Jersey in September 1942. A moment of great emotion, obviously. But let Bobby remember it.
During the show, we did an arrangement by Bill Finnegan on the Rhapsody in Blue. And I had a rather long solo near the beginning of it. And by this time, I threw the banjo away, and I was with the trumpets. I made good. So during the performance, the habit was for me to walk down to the center of the stage and play the solo and then walk way back up. Now, being the last performance, we all were very sentimental. Everybody, to put it briefly, everybody got well loaded. We just couldn't stand the idea of discontinuing the band. And it was some scene, my goodness. The last thing I remember before blacking out was a trombone player turning around and said, Glenn said to tell Hackett to stay up there for the solo.
Bobby Hackett and the Glenn Miller Orchestra and Rhapsody in Blue, the studio recording of July 1942. Bobby obviously stayed very loyal to his Miller associations. In 1965, when Ray McKinley was leading the official Glenn Miller Orchestra, he invited Bobby Hackett back to rework some of the favorite Miller tunes. they did without the vocal group. They put Bobby Hackett in instead, for instance, in Elmer's tune. Tune, Ray McKinley directing the Glenn Miller Orchestra, Bobby Hackett. In 1965, Bobby Hackett was here in Britain with Tony Bennett at the London Palladium, and we must remember that long and happy association. In a Frank Hunter arrangement, Bobby Hackett plays some of TB's greatest hits, and I rather like this particular one, Put on a Happy Face. face.